Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting Australian Indian Radio's daily Facebook live update so presented together with Australian Indian Radio and Brisbane Indian Times. Hey, I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Yes, it was a great weekend. The weather held out quite well and quite nicely for Father's Day. We'll show you some glimpses of Cuchimudlo Island later on, our trip there. So, right now, let's take a very quick look at what the weather is going to be doing for the rest of today. Monday, once again, the 7th of September. With that, I'd like to welcome Dilraj.
Good morning, everyone. Weather forecast for the rest of today is maximum of 23 degrees. Brisbane area is mostly cloudy with 40% chances of rain. Wind southeasterly 20 to 30 km per hour, becoming light in the evening. Fire danger is low to moderate. Sun protection is recommended till 2:40 p.m. UV index is predicted to reach 7, that is high. Till tomorrow, stay safe and have a good day. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dilraj. And that's the news for today. And as we mentioned that, the fire danger is always high around this time of the year with very little rain that we have. And of course, UV protection, so sun protection is recommended that you do have that sun protection that you have. Well, with that, let's move on to the some of the news for today. And number one, the Queensland government together with QPS are cracking down on the hoons. As we know, everyone's concerned about the safety of everyone. So let's see that first before we go. Yes, we got lots to talk about. Yes, I know everyone's waiting to hear for what's happening down south and what has been the new announcements from Premier Daniel Andrews. But right now, let's stop the hoons here in Queensland.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Father's Day to dads out there. Great to be joined by the Commissioner, Assistant Commissioner Ben Marcus, and two very vocal local members of Parliament, Mel McMahon and Megan Scanlon. They've been very vocal about what we can do as a government working alongside the Queensland Police Service with putting more pressure on people who choose to disrespect our neighbourhoods, hoons. Now, there's a clear message for hoons. We're going to catch you. We're going to catch you, and it's now your time to be held to account for the irresponsible, reckless behaviour that you have been engaging in. The strange thing about the type of people who commit these offences is that they're hooning in their own neighbourhood, in their own suburbs. They're actually disrespecting their own community, and it's time for us to step up the pressure on them. So there's two very important announcements that we're making today. The first is investing in higher technology for our police, because the key thing here for our police is to support them with having the necessary evidence to bring these matters before court so that these hoons can be punished. It's interesting that the hoons haven't already got the message, because we have the harshest hoon penalties in the nation. You can not only go to jail, you can not only get huge fines, but we can also take your car. And we can take your car, in certain instances, forever. So the message to hoons is clear. There's already harsh penalties there. Now we're giving the police the extra tools to actually better prosecute these matters and better hold you to account. The other thing we're looking at, and this is a game changer for the police, the Commissioner will speak to this, and it also follows some calls from our local MPs and also the police union around what we can do to streamline the processes for holding people to account. So this is the concept of owner onus or driver deeming. The simplest way to explain it is that if you go through a speed camera, the registered owner is deemed to be the driver unless they can prove otherwise. We're looking at extending that to hooning as well. So if you're caught on camera, whether it's one of these cameras or through the thousands of cameras around the state that are run by the government and councils, then we will be sending you a notice to say, if you can't prove who the driver is, then you will be deemed to be the driver. This is a game changer for police. So we're starting the policy work on this. We'll continue to work on that, but it is something that we're committed to doing because it will allow our police to prosecute even more people who are engaging in this reckless and idiotic behaviour. I'm very proud to be a part of a government that's committed to supporting our police. These additional resources and these tougher laws will make a big difference to their work, but most importantly, it'll make our community a safer place, and that's something we should all be committed to doing. Commissioner?
Just a few words.
And a safer community is what we are all looking forward to, and of course we need to cooperate with QPS and the government on the things that they have put forward. And of course, with the warnings, they go out for a little bit of pleasure for but endanger the lives of everybody else. Well, right now let's go straight to Victoria Fest. And then we will come to Queensland, as I know everyone's been waiting to hear what's been happening down south, because it will not only affect people down south or in Victoria, it also affects everyone, right across the country.
More than 1,000 different scenarios have been put into this supercomputer. We're very grateful for the assistance of the University of Melbourne and the University of New England. You can't argue with this sort of data. Can't argue with science. You can't do anything but follow the best health advice. Otherwise, we will simply, for a brief period of sunshine, for a brief opening up, but we won't really be opening up at all. We'll just be beginning to lose control again of this virus, and the consequences will be even greater than the difficulties that I know and I appreciate many, many Victorians are experiencing today. So firstly, from 11:59 p.m. on the 13th of September, we will have to extend out for 2 weeks the current stage 4 restrictions that Victorians are living under. This is for Metro Melbourne. I'll do regional Victoria in just one moment. So we have to extend. We cannot open up at this time. If we were, then we would lose control very, very quickly. And again, Alan will speak to that in more detail. So, however, there are some changes to that 2-week extension of stage 4. Let me run through those now. So from next Sunday, the curfew will be eased and it will be expanded to 9 p.m, not 8 p.m, in recognition that the days are getting longer. That is a small step, but one that we can safely take. Exercise will be increased to 2 hours per day, up from the 1 hour per day. Social bubbles to accommodate those who live on their own, in direct response to feedback we've had from those who have been isolated away from anyone else for a long period of time. We will create those social bubbles so that, much like the way intimate partner arrangements work now, singles, those who live alone, will be able to partner up with somebody else and they'll be able to visit each other. The 5-kilometre rule will not apply, but the curfew will. So it is essentially extending those arrangements for partners who don't live in the same household to those who live on their own. Public outdoor gatherings of 2 people will be allowed, or a household, for up to 2 hours, not the 1 hour of exercise. So it's exercise and or spending time outside, whether it be visiting the park, so on and so forth. And playgrounds will reopen. That is for the 2-week period until the 28th of September. That's the first step.
And that's the latest there from Premier Daniel Andrews. And as we know that there has been a lot of talk of what's going to happen and how it will be done and implemented. Here's the second part of his interview.
We have given quite a lot of thought to the notion of having multiple settings in regional Victoria. However, the fact that it is likely, highly likely, that in a couple of weeks, based on so about 3 weeks in total from adding the week to come, it is highly likely, not certain, but highly likely that we will meet that case threshold. Then we think it's best to try and have one setting across regional Victoria. What I'm doing today, I'm not announcing that Geelong will be treated differently. I'm simply saying to the good people of Geelong, who I think are entitled to have some warning of the following. Geelong's on close watch. We have got more cases there than other parts of regional Victoria, and we've seen more cases there over a lengthy period of time. So that's not an announcement. It's just that in the event that, not to be getting too far ahead of ourselves, but if you had a set of circumstances, for instance, in a couple of weeks' time, the rest of regional Victoria fits the bill. They've got their numbers down. The numbers are down, except for Geelong, and that to keep Geelong in the same categorisation as, say, Swan Hill would mean that you couldn't open up Swan Hill, then, or move to the next step, then we will look to, say, a special treatment for that Geelong region. I would just say it's not just the City of Geelong. It is a corridor, and we have looked at that as a corridor. And today we've talked about Geelong, we've talked about Colac, and that's for another day. But that's what drives the fact that regional Victoria may very soon get to that, to be 2 steps ahead of metropolitan Melbourne, has meant that we don't think there's a need to put in what can be very confusing multiple different rules, borders that all have to be patrolled and defended and all of that. We think that one setting is best. This job, the great honour that I have to lead our state, every day is filled with decisions that are really, really difficult. Some of them are difficult because they're a genuine 50-50 choice. You're not quite certain which option to choose. Others are difficult because you know what the consequences of those decisions will be. Some of them are indeed heartbreaking. This is not a 50-50 choice. The modelling that Alan will speak to in a moment indicates that if we open up too fast, then we have a very high likelihood that we're not really opening up at all. We're just beginning a 3rd wave. And we will be back in and out of restrictions, in and out of lockdown before the end of the year. Indeed, potentially well before the end of the year. We can't run out of lockdown. We have to take steady and safe steps out of lockdown to find that COVID normal. We must take steady and safe steps to find COVID normal and make sure that in opening up we can stay open. Not a situation where we are unable to begin the task of economic repair, unable to begin the enormous task of repairing the damage that this global pandemic has done to communities, to our economy, to businesses, to workers. That will simply be impossible if we are in and out of restrictions for months and months and months and fail to find that COVID normal. That is what is required, and that is why there is no choice but to do this in a safe and steady way.
So many countries are struggling with control. Some countries haven't finished their first waves. Most others that did achieve early control are now seeing second waves. We may not have seen daily numbers in the thousands like in France and in Spain at the moment, thanks to all the sacrifices that Victorians have made, but it does show how tenuous control can be. The case numbers may be coming down, but it's likely that there are still too many cases in mid-September to open up significantly. So people may ask, why can't we be like New South Wales? Our friends in Sydney aren't in lockdown. The answer is that New South Wales aren't in the same place. There haven't been more than 13 cases a day in New South Wales since early August. At 60 or 100 cases a day in Victoria, we're not even close. If we open up too early, we risk another resurgence and undoing all the work that we've done. Next slide, thanks. So modelling isn't about predicting the future. It can only give us what the most likely outcomes are based on what we know and what we propose to do. What it does allow us to do is to test what-if scenarios. What if we exited to the 3rd step at 25 cases a day, or 10 cases a day, or 5 cases a day? What this modelling does suggest is that if we relax too early, we risk a loss of control and needing another lockdown. We need to find that sweet spot between the length of the current lockdown and the risk of resurgence. So there are no easy choices here, but this is one that we don't want to make. The worst outcome for everyone is the need to have repeated lockdowns with the uncertainty of never knowing from week to week what we're doing. None of us would be able to plan anything. We've come this far now. If we can just hold on a little longer, we can get ourselves into a better place where we can open up more and still maintain control.
So if we can hold on a little bit longer, we will be in a better position. Let's hear the reinforcement of that case.
The pace at which regional Victoria gets to very low case numbers will mean, in all likelihood, that it will be ahead of Metro Melbourne. But at some point, Metro Melbourne catches up. and we're all on the same setting. If we can get to that average of 5 cases per day for a 14-day period and no cases of unknown acquisition or mystery cases, as we call them, then we'll all be on the same setting, and we'll continue on that setting through the next step and the next step to a COVID normal.
And is that when Melburnians will be allowed to travel to regional Victoria as well?
Yeah, I think that's a natural point at which there's no risk of importing cases to regional Victoria any more than it is from regional Victoria. It's fair to say that the much better situation that regional Victoria is in now is not just the local response that they've had to their cases, which has been fantastic through the regional hubs, but it's also everything that we've done to drive cases down in Metro Melbourne. Obviously, we went into this second wave without regional Victoria having cases, and all of the cases that have occurred in regional Victoria came out of Metro Melbourne. So as we're controlling things here in Metro Melbourne, regional Victoria is on a much better footing.
On social bubbles, will people or families in Melbourne be able to nominate a person in regional Victoria, for example, to be there?
I think when we're on the same setting, that's certainly the case. But at the moment, those constraints within Metro Melbourne and regional Victoria will continue to apply.
The Premier talked about reassessing regional Victoria in 14 days with the potential to move to the third step. What are some of the trigger points that could get regional Victoria there?
They're really about those case numbers and those average case numbers per day over a 14-day period. We're now looking at 2, 3, 4 cases per day in regional Victoria, so they're kind of on a setting where if for the next 2 weeks it continues to improve, that they'll meet that threshold, but also the threshold of no mystery cases or cases of unknown acquisition over a 14-day period. Again, that's looking reasonable, but we'd need to see what that following 2 to 3 weeks looks like. A mystery case is of greater concern because it means there's transmission out there that you're not aware of. You don't know how to control it in the same way that you do for a known outbreak where you know all the close contacts.
So a mystery case is always more complex, as has been said, and we know that the control measures that have been put in place are a little bit tough, and Christmas is coming, and people are getting anxious, and businesses are complaining. We heard from the Chamber of Commerce, and they're screaming as well. But right now, let's go to the Parliament House, where the Premier is making announcements, or has just made an announcement. This news has just come in, so let's see, get the latest update on the Queensland situation.
Well, g'day everyone. Thanks for coming along today. Well, good morning everyone. Thanks for coming along for the COVID-19 Fiscal and Economic Review. When the private sector falls down, government must stand up. And today I'm very pleased to release the government's Fiscal and Economic Review for Queensland, which charts our course to recovery from COVID-19. Given the extreme volatility of financial markets and the economic position of Queensland, it is difficult, very difficult, because of domestic economic circumstances and international economic circumstances to forecast. At this time, we're adopting the same approach as the Morrison government and other states, and forecasting for 2 years rather than 4. And even then, I must be honest, the challenge of forecasting is harder than it's ever been and more difficult than in previous years. While the global and financial economic situation at MIFA now seems a world away, it's worth recapping where Queensland stood pre-COVID. Prior to COVID-19, the Palaszczuk Labor government was on track to deliver its 5th consecutive budget surplus. The Queensland economy was forecast to grow at 2.5% in 1920, strengthening to 2.75% in 2021. Jobs growth since 2015 had surpassed 250,000. Unemployment had reached its lowest rate since May 2012. We'd seen record exports, over $80 billion a year, continuously outpacing New South Wales and Victoria combined. Government debt, as you can see from this slide, government debt in maroon was lower than both New South Wales and Victoria in absolute terms and as a proportion of revenue. And then COVID hit. As we learned last week, Australia has entered its first recession for almost 30 years. In Queensland, state final demand fell by 5.9% in the June quarter. As painful as that is, Queensland's performance was better than New South Wales and Victoria, who both saw falls of around 8.5%. It's important to bear in mind that those quarterly figures reflect a period before Victoria went into stage 4 restrictions and before restrictions in Queensland were significantly eased. As the ABS highlighted, the fall in state final demand in Queensland was mitigated by a 4.6% rise in government consumption expenditure, the largest rise of any state or territory, reflecting $7 billion in investment through our Unite and Recover economic recovery strategy, all designed to protect Queenslanders' health, their jobs and businesses. In a time of crisis, that is the role of government. When the private sector falls down due to circumstances beyond its control, government must step up and do the heavy lifting. Sadly, but not surprisingly, those regions where the most jobs were lost early in the pandemic were those most exposed to international tourism, the Gold Coast, Cairns and Sunshine Coast. But across the state, we can see how many of those jobs have now been clawed back, the falls from the dots in this graph to the solid bars. Between mid-March and the 18th of April, when restrictions first came into effect, around 11% of jobs had been lost on the Gold Coast. As of the 8th of August, jobs have been added on the Gold Coast, so the net loss is now 6%. So this was the impact from March to April. You can see the very significant impact on the Gold Coast, but then we've had the clawing back of jobs. Still unacceptable to have that number of job losses, but you see Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Cairns, but there's been an improvement. There's been an improvement. So those regions, as you'll see from that graph, that have fared the best are those that significantly focus on mining and agriculture, which is a testament to Queensland's diversified economy. The point was made by my counterpart, the Western Australian Treasurer Ben Wyatt last week, but it's worth repeating here today. The states that have fared best are those that have controlled their borders, allowing them to open up their economies inside those borders, and I'm pleased that Queensland is right at the front of the pack. ABS data released on Friday shows 5% growth in retail trade in Queensland in July, the second highest growth rate in the nation. ABS building approvals data from last week shows approvals for houses in Queensland rose by over 17% in July, more than double the national average. In the latest ABS payroll jobs and wages data, the number of jobs in Queensland has grown by 5.4% since mid-April, relative to a 4% growth across Australia. But there is no sugarcoating. There is no sugarcoating the impact this pandemic has had on the lives and livelihoods of so many Queenslanders. COVID has taken its toll. Despite the recent improvements in ABS payroll jobs numbers, 138,200 Queenslanders have lost their jobs since the pandemic started. Tens of thousands more face an uncertain future as the Morrison government withdraws JobKeeper payments. Unemployment is forecast to peak around 9% in the December quarter this year. A gradual recovery will follow, but it will be slowed by a number of factors, including a forecast improvement in the participation rate. By the June quarter of 2021, Queensland's unemployment is forecast to be around 8%. So this has had an impact on the fiscal position of the state. We've seen downward revisions in payroll tax, transfer duties, royalties for coal and gas, and to our GST payments. That's the last column there, GST receipts. All up, this represents a $6.7 billion fall in revenue across the 2 years, 1920 and 2021. At the same time, as I noted earlier, our government has invested heavily in protecting jobs and health. Our expenses have accordingly risen by over $3.8 billion for 1920 and by almost $2.9 billion for 2021. In July, I announced our gross general government deficit was forecast to be $8.4 billion. That forecast has now improved slightly to be $250 million less, around $8.1 billion. Going on to borrowings. Now, I know the LNP is particularly fond of using the measure of total non-financial public sector debt. This is a measure that is not used by any other state or by the Morrison government. If the Commonwealth government used it, if the Morrison government used it, their bottom line would include debt carried by companies like the NBN, Snowy Hydro and Inland Rail. Anyone who uses total debt for political purposes does so for one reason. They want to sell publicly owned companies like generators and ports that carry that additional debt. And for 3 elections in a row, the people of Queensland have said that those companies and corporations should remain in public hands. As we look to the last 2 years and this year, we see the increase in general government debt, but not the debt held by those publicly owned corporations. By the end of this financial year, we forecast our gross general government debt to be $60.9 billion, an increase of $1.5 billion from the fiscal update I delivered in July. This is attributable to the decision of government to extend our payroll tax deferral measures, a $300 million increase in derivative liabilities and an additional $130 million in lease liabilities. Interest rates are, of course, at historic lows, and Queensland's borrowing costs are the same or less than comparable jurisdictions. On 5- and 10-year bonds, Queensland borrowing costs are around the same as the AAA-rated New Zealand.
And we leave that report there as he has rightfully said that protecting jobs is the top priority. Looking at the health and what they have done with the border closures was in the best interest of the citizens and protecting everyone's health. But still looking at those figures, the employment rate is going up a little bit, a touch, and of course the revenues coming from the mining and the other sectors when tourism goes down. So hey, well, we've all been talking about the mining sector and where are the greenies right at this point in time. So as you can see, all the revenue generated from that sort of sector. So everything needs to be done moderately. It needs to be done with care. Of course, protection of the environment is of prime importance. But once again, we have to look at things in totality. And a politician won't be a politician unless they mention something about the other parties and what's happening on the other side as well. So, right now, let's take a look at New South Wales and see what's happening there, what the numbers are there.
5 new cases of COVID-19 were diagnosed in the 24 hours to 8 p.m. last night. This brings the total number of cases in New South Wales to 3,915. There were 30,339 tests reported in the 24-hour reporting period, compared with 23,169 in the previous 24 hours. Of the 5 new cases to 8 p.m. last night, 1 is a returned traveller in hotel quarantine, and 4 are locally acquired and linked to the CBD cluster. The total number in this cluster is now 61 cases. One of today's cases attended Colito's Cocktail Bar in Newtown between 6:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. on Friday the 28th of August. Anyone who was at that bar for at least 1 hour during this time must immediately get tested and self-isolate for 14 days since attending. These people must stay isolated for the entire 14-day period, even if a negative test result is received. The venue has been closed for cleaning.
So there's the figures coming out of New South Wales. And lately, what we have seen that, police have come under a lot of fire as well. And there's a lot of angst amongst the general public. And there have been a lot of protests happening there. The next 2 video will be one. The first protest there is in Sydney. The second one is in Melbourne as well. And you can see, the extent to which the police have to go to control these measures. And of course, we can understand the feelings of the general public when the protester is being arrested.
Is this something you do when someone doesn't? This is Australia. Shame! Shame! Let him go! Let him go! Let him go! Let him go!
And there we go. Everyone's chanting about letting him go, that let him go. New South Wales police arrested a number of people in Sydney's Hyde Park and Olympic Park at unauthorised protest against COVID-19 lockdown measures. And among those arrested was a 54-year-old man who police say assaulted an officer. Two other people, a 44-year-old and a 56-year-old woman, were also arrested at Hyde Park. So that's it. Right now, similar incident, but in Melbourne. So police have made several arrests in Melbourne's Shrine of Remembrance at Albert Park Lane as hundreds of people protested against the city's lockdown measures. So as you can see, all this is happening around the country. People are getting upset. And it's not only here in Australia. As we have seen before, that protests have been taking place in all around the world. Some people are even calling out that this pandemic, this coronavirus thing, the whole thing is a big scam. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a very quick commercial break before we go to the world news.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globnetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 सैंडगेट रोड, बुंदल, क्वींसलैंड। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, रियल एस्टेट इज अवर वर्ल्ड।
And real estate is at well. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome back. And right now, in the news from around the world, first of all, we'll go to Beirut. Rescue workers digging through the rubble in Beirut building for the third day on. This was said in the weekend that there was no longer hope for someone alive more than a month after that massive port explosion shattered Lebanon's capital. So they're giving up hope of finding anyone alive there anymore. So that's Beirut. And next up, we go to Germany, where German Chancellor Angela Merkel says she expects Russia to explain its position on Navalny case. A German government says the critic of President Vladimir Putin was attacked in a Soviet-style nerve agent similar to chemical Russia used to position former spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter. So let's take that news. It is in German, but it's got subtitles.
Wir unterrichten unsere Partner in der EU und in der NATO über die Untersuchungsergebnisse. Wir werden gemeinsam beraten und im Lichte der russischen Einlassung über eine angemessene gemeinsame Reaktion entscheiden. Alexei Nawalny wurde Opfer eines Angriffs mit einem chemischen Nervenkampfstoff der Novichok-Gruppe. Dieses Gift lässt sich zweifelsfrei in den Proben nachweisen. Damit ist sicher, Alexei Nawalny ist Opfer eines Verbrechens. Er sollte zum Schweigen gebracht werden, und ich verurteile das auch im Namen der ganzen Bundesregierung auf das Allerschärfste. Das Verbrechen an Alexei Nawalny richtet sich gegen die Grundwerte und Grundrechte, für die wir eintreten.
And there we go. As she has mentioned that, strong measures must be taken. And it's good to see her back in good health. As we know, a little while back, she was a little bit shaken, but, she seems to have picked up out of that very well. Well, Australia went to England, and England has beaten Australia by 2 runs to win the first T20 International in Southampton. It looks odd when you see the stadium and there's no one in the stadium there at all. And of course, when the flight from Australia left for England, there were people on Facebook and social media complaining that how can these people get in clearance to fly and not the general public. But of course, you have to see what they're for, and they have traveled under the special arrangements there as well. So the last news for today is going to U.S. and U.S. presidential nominee Joe Biden. Let's see what he has to say on the way. President Trump has been mocking U.S. dead.
Quite frankly, if what is written in the Atlantic is true, it's disgusting. And it affirms what most of us believe to be true. That Donald Trump is not fit to be the job of president, to be the commander-in-chief. The President reportedly said, and I emphasize reportedly said, that those who sign up to serve instead of doing something more lucrative are suckers. Let me be real clear. When my son was an assistant U.S. attorney and he volunteered to go to Kosovo while the war was going on as a civilian, he wasn't a sucker. When my son volunteered and joined the United States military as the Attorney General and went to Iraq for a year, won the Bronze Star and other commendations, he wasn't a sucker. The servicemen and women he served with, particularly those who did not come home, were not losers. If these statements are true, the President should humbly apologize.
And as mentioned that, the President should apologize for using such terms against the people who have saved the country and saved so with dignity. So, ladies and gentlemen, and with that news, let's go. And as I mentioned that I will today show you a little bit of, things that was happening around the weekend. And with that, we will go and have a quick look of things that took place in the weekend for Father's Day with us. So we did go to a very quick trip to Cuchilo Madlo Island, and here's a glimpse of there.
So here we are reporting from Cuchilo Mud Island, and it's going to be a beautiful day out here on the boat, which is a barbecue boat right in the background, which is, as you can see, that's the boat that will be going on, and that's for the ride. Yes, it's such a beautiful and wonderful day out here at Cuchilo Island.
So that's the jetty on that island. And to get to that, you can either take your car on this barge, or you can take the passenger ferry, which you will see in a minute. So it's a beautiful part of Brisbane, just off Victoria Point Jetty. That's the barge that heads off with your cars to the island, and the other barge, the other ferry which will go across, is the passenger ferry. And there goes the passenger ferry backing off now. and on the island we hired our own boat. It's a boat that has got fully equipped with barbecues, facilities, and the lot. So it's a beautiful setting out there, and if you haven't been to that island, I recommend that you do make a trip out there, because you will not be disappointed, because it is just so lovely, and it's so close by as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, the last thing for today is all our upcoming functions and events. Let's take a very quick look at it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your company. It's been wonderful having your company, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of this Monday, and of course a wonderful week coming ahead as well. Last week has been a very busy week for me, and it's on Sunday night Sunday. It became morning because it started on Saturday and went into Sunday because of the timing in India with ODI. There was a diaspora response, and it was a very well-organized symposium, online symposium, where we had speakers from all around the world, but it was coordinated by the University of Gujarat, the diaspora studies there, and of course Professor Ajay Dubey, always putting in 110% into these seminars. And of course we had that press conference with Minister Alan Tudge. I did show you the glimpses on Saturday, and of course we've all been working on the anti-vilification, the Vilification Act, and the protests and the rights of people, and a submission that's going to be made to the government. And of course there's many meetings happening on the organization of revamped White Ribbon, and of course we have GoPio meetings and other things on happening today as well. And the paper goes to press tomorrow, so be prepared to pick up your copies this weekend, and it will be the full-on version, because there's so much information in it for this time around as well. So remember that Brisbane Indian Times, we always put out the print and of course our online version there as well. So until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. Be good, but most of all, remain safe. Hi, thank you so much for being with me.